preparation for today's event, Beverly's been doing some survey work to look at the importance and value of design for business growth, and so I'm sure she'll be able to make reference to that during the session today, and you'll find the report that you've got there to sort of take home and peruse later. So let the debate begin. Looking for growth, sack the economists, and hire a designer, creating economic value through design.
You hadn't told me what the title of this panel was going to be when you invited me, and it says sack the economists, hire a Midlands designer. Well, the second bit is fine, the first bit I'm not too keen on. And I will explain why. I think there's quite a lot we can hear from Beverly about how difficult it is to measure the value added of design. But I think it's well understood that there is a big value there. And what happened in terms of convincing me even more is that the Design Commission has been set up between the Houses of Parliament, the two, so both the House of Lords and the House of Commons, have a number of inquiries now that they have started. The first one was on design and education, and they asked me to chair it, and it was really quite extraordinary time, because it worked exactly like a select committee. We had all these great designers and people who run the Design Museum and so on that commission as well, and George Cox, who a number of you would know. And then we had people coming and giving us evidence from industry, from universities, from schools, and we took all that in, and it was so obvious that there was a bit of a sort of mismatch, between what is actually perceived to be sort of role the various sectors in the economy are providing for the economy, and what is actually happening in practice, with design tending to be quite underrated. So we took all that in and did some our survey work and produced this report, which we then started to use as a way to lobby and influence government thinking in this area. It's called Restarting Britain. And I think it's really quite interesting because it actually does prove, because there's quite a lot of economics in it, the importance of design in the economy. So perhaps I'm preaching to the converted, so I'm not necessarily going to disagree with Beverly about the importance of design. I'm going to disagree about whether you can actually put in some value to it. What we definitely discovered from the discussions that we had was that design is a lever for growth. As you said, growth wasn't mentioned an awful lot well, it was mentioned by a number of people, but not actually the focus of what this conference here is about. But today comes the news that the International Monetary Fund has downgraded the figures for the UK for 2012 to a negative growth picture. We may have a bit of positive growth next year, but actually it isn't what we had all expected. And that's where you can actually attack the economists, because we get it wrong all the time. But the forecasts look pretty dire. And of course we have the whole Eurozone economy also suffering. And missing out the bits that can actually give us quite a lot of growth is wrong. We have heard, of course, that manufacturing exports are not doing that badly at all. But manufacturing exports from the UK do reasonably well because of the design element that's in there. Without that, I mean, the counterfactual, as the economists would say. In other words, what would have happened if we didn't have this excellence in design in this country? It would, it's really sort of hard to contemplate. So design has been proven to boost the competitiveness of businesses. We do sell more British products and services as a result of design. It unlocks the commercial potential of a number of the research activities going on right now. When we started looking at innovation seriously in the DTI when I was there, it was the first innovation report in the early 2000s that was done. And we invented, we thought there's absolutely no money going into innovation. How can we channel some of whatever the government is doing, which of course has been diminishing generally, into innovation, ensure it's sort of ring-fenced and increases. So we invented, I remember sitting around the table and inventing the Technology Strategy Board, which of course was very manufacturing based originally, but has now expanded quite significantly, taking creative sectors as well, and the importance of design is understood increasingly. So at least there was some attention given to this. But as I said at the beginning, it was very much a sort of limited view at innovation brought about by commercializing manufacturing type research and development. And it really has changed, because we've also started measuring the amount of invisible investment that was taking place, innovating in terms of the way companies run, so designing the systems, the interactions between manufacturing and services, for example, which is really so important. How much do you borrow from other disciplines? And that, of course, also led us to think a lot more about higher education, multidisciplinary teams that perhaps could be set up, how you can get engineering faculties to work a lot more closely with some of the other softer areas in campus. So that actually started us going down that route. But it was obvious by the time we started this design commission that a lot of it was still not understood, and that the government did not seem to fully appreciate this lever for growth in the economy, and the significance of design as the spine really that runs through industry, innovation, and actually at the end of the day social well-being. And yet here we are, in fact not only not understanding it, but attacking it in many ways. If you look at education, actually our focus was on education. After all, we seem to be rather good in terms of producing designers. There are lots of UK people or British educators certainly, who then go on and do miraculous things like with Apple, for example. And we do have a centre of excellence in the UK, not only in London in terms of where lots of things are happening, but centre of excellence in terms of the UK itself being very much that. And our education system is considered to be doing well at the, if you like, the higher education level. But what seems to be happening is that this inflow, if you like, of students going into design courses is likely to be very significantly affected, because the national curriculum, the moves anyway that have been made so far, but we might go over those we've managed to stop that from happening immediately, was downgrading design and technology, for example, and actually we don't have that design at all in the National Baccalaureate, which was being developed. And that is, of course, very significant, because if you don't have that type of emphasis for the young people, and of course the interesting thing about design, which is very different, I think, to what happens in lots of other disciplines, is that it encourages entrepreneurship. It encourages also working together in teams, the sort of qualities that employers really want from their people. They haven't always understood when you ask them a question, would you hire someone who's done the design, what they bring to the company when they've been educated properly, because that's how basically you develop your people, and that's what sort of skills you have as a result. So we were very, very keen to make sure that both at primary level and secondary, we still don't know exactly what's going to happen at secondary level, but at least primary level has been preserved so far, and that's been announced, so that's good. What will happen there is still an issue. It does not mean, though, that we are particularly satisfied from the work that we did, that schools aren't necessarily doing the right thing and are producing the right people for us. So there still needs to be a big, big push to improve the quality of what our school system is producing. So at the end of our inquiry, clearly we were absolutely convinced we had to lobby, and we've been lobbying, and I think lobbying reasonably successfully, and we've actually spread the word. And I think we've done reasonably well there, but we can't sort of stop it, because what we really think is that the government needs a national design strategy, and it takes ownership of that strategy in a well-informed and proactive way. We really believe that there should be an external chair of this strategy, independent, and really therefore put together something which will become part of an industrial strategy. I have produced many industrial strategies in my time for my ministers. It's really important to do so because it touches on all sorts of areas, but design has to be at the centre of it, and I have to admit, even in everything that I've done so far, that it didn't in the past. But I think it has to in the future, and it didn't in the past because there have been so many competing things there. But you cannot have, the reason why it's absolutely central, is that you cannot have, even talking about rebalancing the economy, but just saying we're just going to focus on manufacturing without looking at what the rest of the economy does. The design and creative sector produces now such a large part of our GDP, and putting the two together and ensuring that manufacturing increases the sort of value added to the economy is absolutely essential to keep us competitive. So design, therefore, has to be absolutely there, and the design strategy and evidence for it, if you like, needs to be put together. The second point, just to sum up for my recommendations, is that we have to be very, very watchful of what happens on the education side. And any attempts to reduce funding or reduce the importance of design has to be fought against. The further education routes, vocational training, there's been some announcements already on that, on the design, which can perhaps be a route other than just going through university for the design, need to be improved very significantly. What we have so far is not good enough. And there have been some moves as a result of our report, and we believe there should be an awful lot more thought given on what types of further education routes there could be, which employers would really value and hire people from. And then finally, we do need higher education centres of excellence. I mentioned the UK being a centre of excellence, but what we do really need is resource-intensive, high-quality centres which teach in collaboration with business. Tomorrow's innovators and also looking at future practice that can be developed in that area. So there are those Fraunhofer type institutes the government has set up, which are innovation centres all around the country. There is one which is really more focused on if you like, design and innovation, but not enough. I mean, the words don't really make it through really that the descriptions of those centres. And I think an awful lot more needs to be done. I think probably need to be dedicated ones to just raise the importance of design. Having said that, there is always a danger that we just think of design as something separate. And I do talk about needing design strategy and so on. It cannot be done in isolation. It should not be looked at as something separate. It should be looked at as something that needs better integration with the rest of the economy, because that is the only way that we will really get a more sort of balanced economy developing in the future, which remains competitive. And just to remind you again where I started, we are suffering from a low, stagnant growth environment at best. There may be slightly better figures this quarter, who knows. But in reality, we are ignoring various bits of the economy that can do an awful lot to get us out of where we are at our peril. And I think design can make a huge difference.
I was actually talking with an economist in DBiz yesterday who said to me that design was a small coefficient of TFP.
Total factor productivity, for those of you who don't understand.
Which I felt the people in this room might not really agree with, to be honest. Charles is shaking his head down there. And I felt there was something else, that there's a lot of focus on technology-driven innovation and how we're discovering new things using, we talk a lot about STEM, science, technology, engineering. It's very, very important, it's critical. But the difference with design-driven innovation, and obviously we've got Professor Heskett here as an expert in this area, is that it's all about the user and how we transform the quality of life for people. And what we observed through the Think and Do Tank of Idea Birmingham was that actually in the Midlands we've been transforming the quality of life for people for hundreds of years, since Abraham Darby and Coalbrookdale and all that, right through to today. And one of the sort of things that we're particularly good at in the Midlands is this ability to combine creative thinking with productive skills to create brands. And we reckon we've got more brand-led businesses in this region than any other region in the UK. And what we really wanted to flag up was that there's something very, very special, something remarkable going on in the Midlands at the moment, with a sort of resurgence driven by these brand-led businesses. And the figures obviously take a while to catch up. ONS stats are still at 2009, but we do know that last year the Midlands exported more than London, 38 billion of exports, second in the UK, only to the southeast. And so we held our expo, we formed a Think and Do Tank, we showcased the brilliance of our brands. People across the region were staggered when they came and impressed, and the public just had no idea we were making all these incredible things, drawing on supply chains in the region and expertise here. So we decided to sort of do a survey, and in pulling together the survey, I was very much able to draw on the thinking and writing of Professor Heskett here, formerly of Hong Kong Polytechnic University, but also of the work of the Danish Design Council. And what the work of the Danish Design Council showed, and obviously the Design Council here, was that design-aware businesses outperform those that are not design-aware. And the Danish Design Council research, which has been going on since 2001, showed that these businesses outperform on sales, profits, exports, and employment. So we took that sort of research methodology and we went out there, and in September, so it's a very sort of recent bit of research, we interviewed 24 businesses. Those 24 businesses have a turnover of 24.5 billion. They're exporting, the manufacturers 80% of that, which is 17 billion. They're employing over 30,000 in the region directly, and they're employing 32,000 in the supply chain. And what our results showed was that of the most design-aware of those businesses, 93% of them are planning for growth, and that against a stagnant economic backdrop. And 62% were planning for significant growth and 30% for modest growth. 62% had taken on employees recently, and 87% of those firms attribute their success to design and innovation, and they think it's our region's unique identifier. Firms were investing about 14% of turnover in new product development, over 3 billion if that number is correct, and all companies had introduced new products in the last year. That was a very interesting statistic because the last Design Council research showed under 50% of companies were in the Midlands were introducing new products over the 3-year period. So there was this tremendous innovation going on, resulting in new job creation, exports, and so forth. So what do we want? Have I got a minute left?
30 seconds.
Okay, 30 seconds. What do we want? We want 3 things. We want to promote a design-led strategic marketing campaign for Birmingham as the gateway to the Midlands, home to the best brands in the UK. We want to create an innovation and design leaders network to build a collaborative, multidisciplinary heart for the region. And we want to continue supporting our young entrepreneurs, many of whom are in this room already, who are selling out of the mailbox, which have kindly supported our expo. And we want to keep supporting that through the kind of multidisciplinary teaching and learning approach that you talked about, Vicky. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie.
Returned after 23 years abroad to the UK, and I'm still in the process of adjustment. But I think I'll just point out that the polemical statement that was issued as part of the starting point for us to discuss is of interest to me, because it's not that I wish to attack economists. I could defend economists, I could defend designers, I could attack both. But you have to understand that I'm a graduate of the London School of Economics way back in 1960. And by a crab-like progression, I ended up as chair professor at Hong Kong, and before that, for 15 years, I was professor at the